I used to love Saturdays. There was something about the quiet of a weekend morning, the way the sun streamed through the blinds in those first hours. Warm, calm, and full of potential. My name is Rachel. I lived alone at the time, in a one-bedroom apartment just outside of Westbridge, Oregon. I wasn't exactly a creature of habit, but there were some things I kept consistent in my routine. One of those was my weekly Costco trip. Every Saturday around 9 a.m., I'd grab my keys, reusable bags, and shopping list and head to the Westbridge Costco. It was only about 10 minutes from my apartment, maybe 15 if I hit the lights wrong. I liked going early, before the samples, before the families flooded in, before the parking lot became a war zone. I could get everything I needed for the week and be back home by 10:30, sometimes earlier. This was something I'd done for over a year. It was ordinary, safe, predictable, until it wasn't. A few years back, I'd moved to Westbridge for a new job, HR admin for a mid-sized tech company. I didn't know many people at first, so my weekends became a kind of solace. I'd fill them with errands, long walks, and small comforts like grocery shopping or reorganizing a drawer. Costco was my favorite. There was something calming about pushing that oversized cart down wide aisles under bright lights, listening to soft indie music overhead while I loaded up on eggs, apples, oat milk, protein bars, and the occasional rotisserie chicken. That store felt familiar, friendly even. I recognized the faces of a few employees, though I never talked much beyond a smile or a good morning. One woman at the door, Donna, I think, always had bright earrings and a huge smile. The guy who stocked the bakery aisle always had his headphones in. I never caught his name. This story happened in early spring. The mornings were still cool, but the daylight was stretching out again. That Saturday started off like every other. I woke up around 7:30, made a cup of coffee, and threw on leggings, sneakers, and a hoodie. I tied my hair back into a quick bun and checked the time. 8:56 a.m. I grabbed my bag and drove to Costco, pulling into a spot halfway down one of the middle rows. The lot was maybe a third full. That sweet spot of early enough to beat the crowd but late enough to avoid the line of diehards waiting outside the door. I grabbed a cart from the corral instead of inside. They always rolled smoother. As I walked in, Donna scanned my card with a cheerful, "Good morning," and I smiled back. Inside it was calm, cold in the produce section as always. I loaded up on blueberries, spinach, and pre-chopped salad mix. There was an older couple by the meat section, having a debate about pork tenderloin. A dad was trying to wrangle two kids while balancing a pack of paper towels. Nothing strange, nothing off. I spent maybe 25 minutes browsing, then hit the checkout. Self-checkout was mostly empty. I scanned everything, bagged up fast, and was out the door by 9:40. As I wheeled my cart through the automatic doors, I felt something odd for just a split second, like a little pinch in my stomach. Nothing major, just a flicker, like being watched. But when I glanced around, there was nothing, just a couple of people heading in, someone packing a car a few rows away. I loaded my stuff into my trunk, returned the cart, and drove home. I remember turning on a podcast on the drive back, something about unsolved mysteries. I remember thinking the host's voice was a little too chipper for the subject matter. That's how normal everything felt. That's how completely unremarkable the morning seemed, until 3:17 p.m. I was on the couch, halfway through folding laundry and watching reruns of The Office, when my phone buzzed. Instagram notification. User 1238gray98 tagged you in a post. I frowned. I didn't recognize the username. I tapped it out of curiosity. The profile was completely blank. No profile pic, no bio, 0 followers, 0 following. Just one post. It was a carousel. First slide, a blurry photo of me. I was in the produce section, looking at a container of strawberries. The shot was angled, like it had been taken from behind a nearby display. My face was partly visible. Second slide, a clearer shot of me pushing my cart past the freezer aisle. Still indoors, still inside Costco. I looked completely unaware. Third slide. A video. My stomach dropped the second it started playing. It showed me walking through the parking lot heading toward my car. The camera was still. The shot slightly zoomed in. My gait, my hoodie, even the way I tucked my keys into my fist as I walked, everything was unmistakably me. The video ended right as I opened my car door. The perspective made it clear. Whoever took it had been inside another vehicle, watching, waiting. I backed out of the video, heart thudding. The post had no caption, no hashtags, no comments, just me, alone, being watched. I clicked on the username again, still blank. I refreshed the page and just like that, it was gone. Account not found. I stared at my phone for a long time. Was this a prank? Some kind of AI glitch, a scam? But it didn't feel like that. Those photos weren't staged or manipulated. I remembered those exact moments. I even remembered the strawberries. I'd picked the one on the left because the berries looked firmer. No one I knew would do something like this. I didn't have any recent conflicts. I wasn't dating anyone. I had a small but stable friend circle and kept to myself mostly. No coworkers with a grudge. And yet, someone had watched me, closely, followed me through the store, filmed me from a car in the parking lot. They had tagged me, which meant they either knew my full name or had gone to some effort to find my account, and then deleted everything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what to report. Someone maybe watched me and then maybe deleted a post. I sat there for a long time, frozen. Eventually, I shut all the blinds. For the next few weeks, I avoided Costco entirely. I went to other grocery stores, smaller ones, busier ones. I varied the times. I stopped posting publicly on Instagram. I even considered deleting my account, but something about that felt like letting whoever it was win. I never got another notification, no messages, no sightings, nothing. But that didn't mean the feeling went away. Every time I parked somewhere, I glanced around. Every time I heard footsteps behind me in a store, my heart started pounding. And every time I passed a car with a person sitting alone inside, I felt that same pinch in my gut, like I was being watched again. Months passed. I thought I was doing better. Then one night, in the middle of December, I had a dream. In it, I was back at Costco, walking the aisles. But they were empty. Not just of people, but of products. Shelves bare, lights buzzing. I pushed my cart alone, my footsteps echoing. And then I heard a click, a camera shutter. I turned around, but there was no one. Just that sound again. Click, click. When I woke up, it was 3:17 a.m. The exact time I'd gotten the Instagram tag all those months ago. After that, I started trying to figure it out. I dug into forums, stalker support threads, even Reddit. I learned how easy it was to create a burner account, how some people used VPNs to stay hidden, how hard it was to trace something that had been deleted so quickly, and how common it was for women to be filmed by strangers without ever knowing. That idea sunk deep into me. How many times had I been watched before and just never noticed? I didn't step foot in that Costco again for almost 11 months. But one rainy Saturday in February, I pulled into the parking lot again. I don't know why. Maybe it was about closure. Maybe I was just tired of being afraid. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it had just been a one-time thing. The lot was half full. I parked close to the front, walked in. Donna was there, same earrings. "Long time no see," she said with a smile. I blinked. Yeah, it's been a while. Everything looked the same. The layout hadn't changed. The music still played softly overhead. A kid was crying in the bakery. An older man was sampling something in front of the deli. I kept my head on a swivel. Nothing strange. No photos later, no tags, no deleted accounts. But even now, years later, I still get that pinch in my stomach if I shop alone on a Saturday morning. Not because of what happened, but because I still don't know who did it. And worse, if they ever stopped watching. I remember it so clearly because that week had already been stressful. My girlfriend, Megan, had her car in the shop for what was supposed to be a quick repair, a belt replacement, but it turned into a full 4-day ordeal because they discovered some kind of leak. She works at Costco, the big one off Chandler Parkway in Red Ridge, and though she usually drives herself, I agreed to be her chauffeur that week. We both figured it wasn't a big deal. I work remote, and her shifts ended at night when traffic was thin. I'd picked her up 3 nights in a row and nothing unusual had happened. I'd wait in the massive parking lot, watch videos on my phone, maybe scroll social media, and eventually she'd come out tired. We'd grab drive-through and head home. But that Thursday night felt different. Not immediately, not in any way I could put into words at first. But something about the air, the silence, and the way the lights cast long shadows in that mostly empty lot gave me a weird feeling I didn't recognize until later. Megan's shift was supposed to end at 10 p.m., the same time the store closed. I left the house around 9:30 to give myself some cushion. The drive only took about 10 minutes. When I pulled into the Costco lot around 9:45, it was nearly deserted. Just scattered cars in no particular pattern. It wasn't strange. Most customers were gone by then, and the remaining cars belonged to employees finishing their closing tasks inside. I texted her, "Hey, I'm here. Usual spot. No rush." She texted back right away, "Thanks, babe. Just finishing carts and break room trash. Be out in a bit." It was cold that night, barely above freezing, so I kept the car running. I parked a little toward the back, under one of the tall light poles. That's something I always do. It feels safer somehow to park beneath a light rather than in a shadow. I reclined my seat just a little and opened YouTube. Random short videos. Just killing time. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes before I noticed something. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I glanced up. A woman was walking slowly across the parking lot, but not coming from the store's doors. She wasn't walking toward a car either. She was just there. Somewhere near the garden center entrance, but out in the open. She was wearing a white t-shirt, no jacket. Her arms were bare. Her pace was weirdly slow, not sluggish like she was injured, but deliberate, like someone walking just to walk. I stared at her for a second, not knowing why I was paying attention. Something about her felt off. Maybe it was the way her head never turned. Her body swayed a little, like she was cold, but she didn't cross her arms or rub them or shiver. She just kept going in this slow zigzag pattern between islands of empty shopping carts and random parked cars. I looked back down at my phone. She wasn't doing anything wrong, really. Just odd. By the time it was 10 p.m., Megan still hadn't come out, which wasn't totally unusual. Sometimes she stayed a little late to help one of her coworkers. I looked back toward the store, then scanned the lot. The woman was now behind my car. I blinked. She had gotten a lot closer without me noticing. She wasn't walking anymore. She was standing now, several spaces away, just staring, not moving, not pacing, just facing my car. My heart beat a little faster. I sat up straighter and tapped the lock button, even though I was pretty sure I'd already locked the doors. Maybe she needed help, I told myself. Maybe she was lost or homeless or disoriented. But why not approach someone inside the well-lit store? Why linger outside in the cold? I didn't do anything, I just sat still. Then she started walking again, right toward my car. Not fast, just the same pace as before. I gripped the steering wheel without meaning to. She was walking on the passenger side now, closer, her eyes following my face through the windshield. She passed the front of my car and came to the window. Then she stopped. She looked in directly at me. She knocked. 3 times. Knock. 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 I didn't roll the window down. I held up a hand like, "Sorry, I can't help you," and looked away. I didn't want to engage. She knocked again, harder, then again, this time with force. I looked at her, really looked, and there was something in her eyes I didn't like. They were wide, dilated. Her pupils nearly swallowed the color of her irises. Her jaw was clenched like she was chewing on something or grinding her teeth. Then she started pounding, with her fists, with her palms, slapping, banging, shoving the side mirror. I panicked. I threw the car in reverse and pulled out of the space fast. She chased after me, full sprint now. I could see her in my mirror, barefoot and running across the pavement like it wasn't freezing. I turned sharply left and hit the gas, pulling around to the front of the store where the exit doors were. I half expected Megan to walk out right then, but she wasn't there. I kept moving, circled to the far end of the parking lot near the tire center and parked again. I texted Megan quickly. "Hey, some woman just tried to open my car door, really weird, barefoot and freaking out." No response. She was probably cleaning or on a work phone or something. Still, I locked the doors again, checked my mirrors and tried to stay calm. I didn't see the woman anywhere. For a few minutes it was totally quiet. Then I saw movement to my right. She was back, charging at full speed from between two parked vans. I didn't wait. I backed out and floored it again, this time not even caring where I went. I ended up on the other side of the lot again, closer to the gas station side where there were still a couple cars and one security light flickering near the propane tank cage. I was breathing heavy now. I texted Megan again, this time typing faster. "That woman came after me again. I had to drive off. Where are you?" I was about to call her when I saw the Costco doors slide open. Megan came out, wearing her red jacket, slinging her backpack over one shoulder and waving at me. I drove straight toward her and hit the locks again the second she got in. "What's wrong?" she said, looking at me. "You look like you saw a ghost." "There was a woman out there," I said, starting to drive off. She came at my car twice. First she knocked like hard, and then she full-on sprinted at me the second time. Megan laughed. "Are you serious?" "I'm dead serious." She was barefoot and wearing short sleeves. It's like 34 degrees outside. She looked strung out or something, or sick. "I don't know." I didn't roll my window down. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. I haven't seen her since I circled back around to get you." We both looked out the windows as we left the lot. I expected to see her again, maybe standing by the side of the road or behind a car, but there was nothing. Megan shook her head. "That's freaky. Maybe she's mentally ill?" "Maybe, but I don't get why she came after me twice. There are a dozen other cars in that lot she could have walked up to. Why pick mine?" Neither of us had an answer. When we got home, I sat in silence for a bit. I even looked up local news or reports to see if anyone else had encountered something similar in that parking lot. Nothing. The next day, Megan told her manager about the incident. He seemed surprised, but admitted they'd had occasional trouble with a woman loitering behind the building near the trash compactor. Sometimes she dug through dumpsters, but they had never seen her walk up to anyone's car before. I dropped Megan off that day and watched from the lot for a bit, just in case. No sign of the woman. She never came back. At least, not while I was there. But that night changed something in me. I don't sit idle in dark lots anymore. I keep my doors locked. I pay attention when someone walks in my peripheral vision, and I never ever roll my window down. I didn't realize I was being followed until it was too late. Back then I was 17, just a high school junior trying to earn some gas money. I worked at the Costco in Millbrook, a decent-sized town in Oregon. My parents were strict about grades, but they also believed in hard work, so I convinced them to let me get a part-time job as long as I kept up with school. Costco was one of the better places to work in town. Decent pay, good benefits even for part-timers, and a reputation for treating employees right. It was only my second job. My first had been a short-lived summer gig at a frozen yogurt place. I was still figuring out how to balance school, work, and a social life that was barely hanging on. The Costco job mostly meant I worked evenings and weekends, usually on register or folding clothes in the apparel section. I'd been there about 2 months when I met Ryan. It was a Thursday night in early November, and I'd just finished my shift. The sun had set early as it does that time of year, and the huge parking lot was lit by rows of buzzing yellow lights. I had my red vest balled up in one hand and my phone in the other, texting my friend Maddie to see if she wanted to hang out after I got home. That's when I heard, "You just getting off?" I looked up. A guy, maybe 19 or 20, stood a few feet away, smiling at me. He was tall, thin, with light brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. He wore the same red Costco vest I did over a black hoodie and khaki pants. I didn't recognize him, but I knew new hires came in all the time. "Yeah," I said, smiling politely. "You?" "Yep," he nodded. "First week. They've got me bouncing around, stocking, carts, a little bit of everything." I laughed lightly, still focused on my phone. "Sounds about right. I think I did every job in the store my first month." He chuckled. "I'm Ryan, by the way." "Emily." We started walking toward our cars, which happened to be parked near each other. At first, the conversation felt normal. He asked how long I'd worked there, what school I went to. I told him I was still at Millbrook High, and he said he'd graduated from there 2 years ago. "Oh, really?" I said. "I don't think I've seen you before." "I was kind of under the radar," he said with a shrug. "Quiet kid." He asked where I lived, and I gave a vague answer, kind of near the Sonic, which was a few blocks from my neighborhood. He nodded, then said, "Nice. I'm right over there too." Looking back, that should have made me pause. I hadn't seen him around school or in the neighborhood before, and Millbrook isn't that big. But at the time, it felt like a harmless coincidence. When we got to our cars, mine a beat-up blue Corolla, his a white sedan, I told him to have a good night. He smiled and said, "You too, Emily. See you around." I got in, checked my messages, started my car, and pulled out. I didn't notice right away that he was behind me. The route home from Costco isn't complicated. Left onto Millbrook Avenue, then a right onto Ridgeway, which runs right past my neighborhood. I figured he was just heading the same direction. But when I made the turn into Maple Glen Estates, a quiet residential loop with one entrance and exit, I caught something in my rearview mirror. That white sedan turned in too. My stomach flipped a little, but I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe he really did live nearby. I slowed down, trying to give him a chance to turn off, but he stayed right behind me. I passed the first 2 streets, Spruce Lane and Alder Drive, and he didn't veer off. Then I turned onto Hemlock Way, my street. My house was the third on the left. As I pulled into the driveway, the white sedan kept going, crawling past my house at a painfully slow speed. I watched from my side mirror as it reached the end of the cul-de-sac. Instead of turning around, it parked. Just sat there. My hand hovered over my keys. I didn't get out of the car. I waited, watching the silhouette in the driver's seat. The engine stayed on. After maybe 30 seconds, the headlights flicked off. I couldn't see anything after that. I panicked and called my mom. "Can you come outside?" I asked, my voice low. "What's wrong?" "Just, someone's parked outside. I don't know them. Please." My mom opened the front door a moment later, waving. I got out pretending nothing was wrong and walked quickly to the porch. I didn't turn around to look at the car again. Once I was inside, I peeked through the curtains. The sedan was gone. I didn't see Ryan at work the next day, or the next week. I asked around casually and nobody seemed to know who he was. "There was a new guy," my supervisor said, frowning, "but he no-showed after orientation." That didn't make sense. I had talked to him in uniform. He knew the store, had a vest, knew where the employees parked. You couldn't fake that, could you? Weeks passed. I tried to move on. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he did live nearby. Maybe he just parked for a second to answer a text or fix his GPS. But I couldn't shake it, especially not after what happened the following month. It was December, and I was working a closing shift, register duty. My manager, James, asked me to stay 15 minutes late to help bag for another cashier. I agreed, and by the time I finally clocked out, the store was nearly empty. I walked out with another girl, Rosa, who worked in the bakery. We weren't close, but we made small talk on the way to our cars. Hers was closer, so she waved goodnight and got in. I kept walking. As I approached my Corolla, I saw something tucked under the windshield wiper. A folded sheet of notebook paper. At first, I thought it was a flyer or coupon. I opened it. There was no greeting, just 6 words. I know where you sleep. I stood frozen. My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked around the lot, scanning the rows of cars, but saw no one. No white sedan. Nothing. I didn't even remember unlocking my car. I just climbed in and locked the doors immediately, adrenaline crashing over me in waves. I drove straight to the police station. The officer on duty took me seriously, which surprised me. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe it was the fact that I'd brought the note with me in a plastic sandwich bag I found in my glove box. They asked if I had enemies, exes, stalkers. I said no. They reviewed Costco's parking lot footage, but the cameras didn't cover every angle. Whoever left the note had approached from the blind spot near the garden center exit. No license plate, no face, nothing. They increased patrols in my neighborhood. My dad installed a camera above the garage. I started parking closer to the building and only leaving with someone else. But I never saw Ryan again. And to this day, I still don't know who he really was. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to get creeped out in a big box store. Costco had always been one of those places where the chaos weirdly made you feel safe. Families fighting over samples, forklifts beeping in the distance, and the smell of rotisserie chicken and bulk detergent mixing in the air. I started working there in the fall, right after moving back to my hometown in Michigan. It was temporary. I told myself that every day, a job to pay rent while I figured out what came next. I started in the food court, slinging hot dogs and pizzas for the after-church rush. But after 2 weeks of grease burns and impatient customers, I asked for a transfer and got moved to soft lines, clothing, seasonal items, sometimes books and holiday decor. I liked it better. It was quieter. People didn't seem as aggressive over socks as they did over churros. That night, the one I'll never forget, started off completely normal. It was mid-December, the height of Christmas shopping, and I was scheduled for closing, 2:30 p.m. to 11 p.m., with the last hour reserved for restocking and organizing after the store locked up. I remember it was snowing when I came in, that wet, heavy kind of snow that soaks your shoes through the laces. The store was packed when I clocked in, and I kept my head down for most of the day, folding pajamas and putting stray jackets back on hangers. After the store closed at 10, I figured I'd be out by 11:15, maybe even earlier. I was wrong. Around 10:20, the store had been officially closed for 20 minutes, and the overhead announcement, "Costco is now closed to customers, thank you for shopping with us," had already been played 3 times. Most of the lights had dimmed, leaving just the overhead fluorescents along the back aisles and a few fixtures near the checkout area. I was folding a table of flannel shirts near the back corner of the clothing section when I heard it. Just a subtle shuffle. Not a loud noise, but loud enough in the silence to make me stop mid-fold. I turned my head toward the next aisle over. Nothing. I figured maybe it was one of the stalkers grabbing something nearby, or maybe the floor scrubber in the distance had just made a weird echo. Still, something about it didn't sit right. Then I noticed something odd. A pair of boots. They were poking out from underneath a hanging display of winter coats. At first, I assumed they were mannequins. They were oddly still, and the lighting was playing tricks on the shadows. But when I moved a few steps closer, I could see the toes twitch. Someone was lying on the ground. I stepped around the end of the rack to get a better view. Whoever it was had wedged themselves between the wall and a pile of unsorted winterwear. Excuse me?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The store's closed." The figure didn't move. For a second, I wondered if they were hurt. But then slowly they sat up. It was a man. Pale, thin, maybe early 40s. He had greasy black hair and wore a navy windbreaker zipped up to his neck. His eyes were wide and glassy like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't say a word. He just stood and walked around the corner of the clothing display, disappearing from my view. Not running, just walking. I radioed it in. Soft lines to front desk. I've got a guest still in the store. Male, mid-40s, navy jacket. Not responding when I talked to him. The crackle on the walkie was followed by Lisa's voice. She was the floor supervisor that night. Got it, Claire? You're sure he's not with janitorial or night crew? I'm sure. He was hiding. Okay, stay where you are. I'll send Matt over. That's when I turned the corner to see if I could keep an eye on him, and spotted him again, standing in the main aisle near the hardware section, completely still, staring straight at me, like he'd been waiting. I froze. I was maybe 50 feet away, but the intensity of the way he looked at me made my stomach turn. I said louder this time, "Sir, the store is closed. You need to head to the exit." No response. Then he started walking. Not fast, not threatening, just walking toward me with no expression at all. I took a step back. Something primal kicked in and I turned around and walked, fast, toward where I knew Matt usually was, near Seasonal. My heart was thudding now. It wasn't just that the man was being weird. It was how silent he was. No reaction, no talking, just following. I found Matt stacking ornaments by the snow globes. There's a guy. He was hiding behind the coats. He saw me and started walking after me. Matt's expression changed instantly. He stood up straight, alert. "Where?" I pointed. But when we went back to the main aisle, the man was gone. We did a quick loop. Nothing. No one hiding behind displays, no one crouching behind carts. I started to feel like maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe he was just confused. Maybe he'd left. Then we heard the sound, something metal falling, from the sporting goods section. We both turned. The man appeared a second later, calmly walking toward us, holding a small aluminum baseball bat. He didn't raise it. He wasn't running, but he was gripping it tight. We didn't get closer. Matt whispered, "We need to go. Now." We backed out toward the front of the store, where the employee-only doors were near the photo center. As we moved, Matt radioed in what we saw. Lisa came on. "Urgent now. Everyone get off the floor. Lock yourselves in back room or employee entrance. We're calling the police." In the next few minutes, it felt like we were in some kind of lockdown drill. All 6 of us working that night, me, Matt, Lisa, Antonio from janitorial, and 2 seasonal workers, Rachel and Tori, gathered near the locked break room by the employee lounge. It had a security lock on it that only staff could access. We waited. I don't know what we expected to happen. Maybe that he'd try to break in or smash something or start yelling. But the worst part was that we heard nothing. Total silence. When the cops got there, probably 10 minutes later, though it felt like an hour, they came in through the receiving bay with flashlights and tasers drawn. They swept the store in teams of 2. Eventually, they found him. He was lying in the back of one of the tall steel shelving units in the warehouse section, tucked behind some patio furniture still in boxes. According to one of the officers, he didn't resist. Just sat there, not talking. Apparently, he had no ID. No bags. Nothing on him but the bat and a dead cell phone. They said he may have been planning to stay the night. We were all asked to give statements, and I overheard Lisa talking to the officers. She said he didn't match any regular members and hadn't checked in through the front, which meant he either slipped in during the busy rush or somehow entered the store while we were opening one of the emergency exits for a delivery earlier. I went home around 1 a.m., still wired with adrenaline. I remember sitting on my bed, staring at the wall, trying to piece it all together. It wasn't just that a stranger had been hiding in the store. It was how methodical he seemed. The way he moved, the way he stared, the way he didn't speak once, not to us, not even to the police. Like he was there for a reason, like he was watching. I quit about a month later, not just because of that, though it definitely pushed me in that direction. I couldn't walk past the coat display without feeling that crawling sensation up my neck. I kept picturing his boots under the fabric, kept seeing those glassy eyes across the aisle. I don't know what he really wanted, but I still think about it sometimes, especially when I'm in a big store at night and everything feels just a little too quiet. Because now I know someone might still be there, even when the doors are locked, waiting. I'm not someone who scares easily. I've always believed in being prepared, not paranoid. I'm 31 years old, a stay-at-home mom of 2 little ones. Lily is 4, and Max just turned 2. My husband Tom works long hours managing a supply warehouse, so when he walks through the door around 6 each evening, I pass the baton with a kiss and a smile. That's my time. Time to breathe, to reclaim a tiny piece of my old self. Some nights I head to the gym. Others, I drive around with music blasting and no car seats in the back, just to remember what silence feels like. But most nights, I run errands. On a Tuesday night in early December, I decided to do a late Costco run. It was a habit I'd picked up recently. Go after dinner, avoid the crowds, shop in peace. The Christmas chaos hadn't quite hit yet, but the store stayed open till 9:30, and by 8:15, it was usually a ghost town. I parked in a well-lit area near the front entrance, directly beside a cart corral. Years of parenting and personal safety training had trained me to always be observant. I took mental notes like muscle memory. A blue Dodge Ram 2 spots over, no one inside. A dark sedan idling across the aisle, windows tinted, engine running. Odd, but not alarming. Not yet. I wasn't nervous. I had my pepper spray in my jacket pocket, a personal alarm on my keychain, and a little confidence from the self-defense class Tom and I had taken last year. But that night, something felt off. Not terrifying, just heavy, like walking into a room that had just been argued in. Costco was quiet, the way I liked it. The bright lights buzzed overhead and Christmas music played faintly from speakers near the ceiling. I grabbed a cart and made a beeline for the seasonal section, hoping to find some discounted string lights and wrapping paper. 15 minutes in, while browsing toys for Max, I noticed a man down the aisle. He was maybe mid-20s, tall and lanky, wearing a baggy gray sweatsuit and tan work boots that looked far too clean for actual labor. His face was emotionless, slack, dead eyes. He didn't have a cart or basket, just walked slowly past the shelves with his hands in his pockets. I gave him a polite nod and smile. No response, no blink. He moved past me like I wasn't even there. I moved on. 5 minutes later in the food section, I saw a second man. Same building, same gray sweatsuit, same boots. He looked up, saw me looking at him, and immediately dropped his eyes and turned down the next aisle without touching a single product. That was the moment the prickling began, at the base of my spine, crawling upward like static. Still, I reasoned. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe they were brothers. Maybe I was tired and overthinking things. Another 10 minutes went by. I had made a strange loop through the store, a detour to the pharmacy section, then back through snacks, then cutting through electronics. I was zigzagging, on purpose now, to see if it would happen again. It did. A third man. Older, maybe mid-30s, but same outfit, same boots, same hollow expression. No cart, no products, just a slow walk past the aisle I was in, eyes briefly meeting mine, then moving away. Now my stomach tightened. Something about the way they looked at me or didn't felt wrong. Not predatory in the usual way, not flirty or aggressive, just clinical, like I was a box to check off. I gripped my cart tighter and started moving faster, my mind racing through possibilities. Were they security? No. Costco staff all wore uniforms. Could they be undercover loss prevention? I looked suspicious, maybe? Number. That wasn't it. They weren't here for what was on the shelves, they were here for something or someone else. I started changing my path entirely, doubling back, darting across sections. And yet, no matter where I went, one of them would pass by within minutes. sometimes two, never all three at once. It was like I was being tracked, hunted. I tried to stay calm, moving toward the front of the store. Near the checkout, I spotted two preteen girls wandering unsupervised near the candy and books. They were giggling, oblivious, and I saw one of the men, the youngest, turn his head toward them, then glance quickly at me. Like a recalibration, I walked straight over. "Hey," I said gently, not wanting to scare them. "Where are your parents?" They blinked at me. One shrugged. "Shopping somewhere. Why?" "Can you go find them for me? Right now, please. It's really important you don't wander alone." Something in my voice must have landed. They nodded and scampered off. I watched the man watch them leave. He said nothing, did nothing, just slowly turned away. That was enough. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I walked briskly toward checkout, head high, scanning for anyone who worked there. A young woman behind a register smiled as I approached. "Hi," I said, lowering my voice. "Can I speak to a manager?" "Right away." She blinked. "Sure. Is everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm being followed." The manager came over within a minute. Her name tag read Samantha. She had kind eyes and a walkie clipped to her belt. I explained everything as calmly as I could. The three men, their matching clothes, their constant presence. The strange, emotionless expressions. The fact they weren't shopping, weren't together, and never picked up a single item. Her face drained of color. "We've had complaints," she said. "Female employees, a few members, same description." She immediately called for a male employee to escort me to my car and radioed for security. "I'll file an incident report, and I'm alerting the authorities as a precaution." I nodded, but my body was starting to shake. My hands felt like ice. The male employee who walked me out, his name was Josh, looked around cautiously as we stepped outside. That's when I saw it. A white windowless van, parked directly behind my car. One of the men was behind the wheel, engine idling. The other two were leaning against the side, heads down, but angled toward my vehicle. As we approached, they saw us. I pointed. "There, that's them." They didn't wait. The men leapt into the van, slamming the door behind them, and peeled out of the lot so fast the tires screeched. Josh stood beside me, stunned. "Jesus Christ!" I opened my car, hands shaking, and got inside with him still standing there, making sure they didn't double back. I didn't cry until I'd locked my doors, pulled out of the lot, and made it a mile down the road. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake with my babies in the next room, thinking of how easily it could have gone the other way, of how that van had no windows, of how calculated their movements were. The next day, I reported everything to the police and gave them the van's partial plate. Samantha had done the same from the store's end. The cops were concerned, but not surprised. By Friday, I saw a post in a local neighborhood group about 2 attempted abductions in the same plaza that week. Same white van, same gray sweatsuits, same chilling presence. I've never been back to that Costco at night. Not alone, not ever. And if you're reading this, I hope you remember one thing. Your instincts aren't paranoia. They're your early warning system. Trust them. Because sometimes when you think you're shopping for your kids, someone else is shopping for you. I always thought that being cautious was just part of who I was, one of those little quirks you inherit without thinking about it. My mom raised me and my 2 younger brothers on her own, and she never let her guard down. Whether we were walking through a crowded store or just unloading groceries in the driveway, she had this way of always knowing what was around us. I used to roll my eyes at her constant warnings, but now, I carry those instincts like armor. At 28, I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. I'm not tall, just around 5 feet, but I'd always been active and confident moving through the world. Still, pregnancy had a way of shifting everything. Your body changes, sure, but so does your place in the world. Strangers look at you differently. Some smile, some stare, some feel like danger wrapped in flesh. It was early afternoon on a Tuesday when I decided to head out to Costco in Crestfield, a mid-sized suburban town in Oregon. I just started maternity leave and wanted to stock up on a few essentials: baby wipes, paper towels, and comfort food I could make in the microwave when I was too tired to cook. My boyfriend, Jordan, was working a double shift at the fire station and wouldn't be home until after midnight. The sky was overcast, that heavy gray you only really get in the Pacific Northwest, and I parked farther away from the entrance than usual. There were closer spots, but I was trying to stay active and avoid door dings on the new SUV Jordan had surprised me with 2 months back. I stepped out, locking the door automatically, one hand resting on my belly, the other clutching my keys like a weapon, an old habit from walking home in college. That's when I saw it. A dull maroon pickup truck. One of those older models with massive tires and peeling bumper stickers. It was parked across the aisle from me, 2 spots down. The windows were down just enough to see inside. 3 men sat in the cab, all staring straight ahead. Not talking, not laughing, just still. At first, I told myself they were waiting for someone. Crestfield was safe. Nothing ever really happened here. But as I glanced up again, just for a second, my eyes locked with the driver's. He didn't look away. Something went cold in my chest. I turned quickly, pretending to fumble in my bag for my shopping list as I made my way toward the entrance. I tried to shake the feeling. Maybe they weren't even looking at me. Maybe they were high or tired or just weird. But that feeling didn't leave. Inside the store, everything was bright and bustling. I lost myself for a while in the towering shelves and the comfort of routine. Sample stations, frozen pizzas, crinkling bulk packaging. I even smiled at an older lady who asked how far along I was. When I finished shopping, I waited by the front doors for a few minutes, pretending to check my phone. I was hoping that the truck would be gone. It wasn't. Still parked. Still full of the same 3 men. I tried not to show it on my face as I walked to my car. My heartbeat felt thick in my ears. I unlocked the SUV as I approached and opened the trunk, tossing in the giant pack of paper towels and closing it with a slam. My keys never left my hand. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine all in one breathless motion. I reversed and started toward the exit. The truck didn't move at first, but then I saw it in my rearview mirror. Its headlights clicked on and it slowly backed out, turning into the same lane I had. I didn't go straight home. My neighborhood wasn't far, just 10 minutes away, but I couldn't let them follow me there. Jordan wouldn't be home, and my nearest neighbor was an elderly couple who went to bed before sunset. I turned left onto Farmview Road. They were still behind me. I took another left onto a side street with no outlet, then quickly doubled back to see if they followed. They did. They weren't even trying to pretend anymore. They were keeping distance, but every turn I made, they mirrored. I felt like prey, like something was about to happen, and my body, already swollen, slower, more fragile, wasn't enough to stop it. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just focused. My fingers shook as I called my sister, Kelsey. "Hey," she answered cheerfully. "Kels," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can I come over? I think someone's following me." Her tone changed instantly. "Where are you?" "Just left Costco. 3 guys in a red truck. They've been following me since the parking lot." "Don't go home," she said immediately. "Go somewhere public. Go to the Target on Brookstone. It's got cameras and security. I'm leaving now. I'll meet you there." I hung up and took the next right toward Brookstone Avenue. I watched the truck in the mirror, still there, still keeping pace. As I pulled into the Target lot, I did something impulsive. I drove past the main entrance and turned behind the building, where the loading docks were, then back around to the front. A little loop, fast and sharp. The truck didn't follow. It slowed at the lot entrance, then moved on, kept going down the road. But I didn't relax. I parked under one of the tall light poles near the security camera. Kelsey showed up 6 minutes later, screeching into the space next to me. phone in hand like a weapon. I didn't realize I was crying until she hugged me. "I didn't imagine it," I said into her shoulder. "They were following me. They were waiting." "No, you didn't imagine anything," she said fiercely. "Let's go inside. Just for a while." We walked into Target, and she made me sit by the Starbucks kiosk while she went and bought me a pink drink and a cookie. I watched the parking lot the whole time, my eyes darting to every red truck that passed. But none of them were the same. We stayed there for over an hour, and when we finally drove back to her place, I stayed the night. She didn't let me sleep alone. I didn't leave the house alone for the rest of my pregnancy. Jordan tried to reassure me, offered to file a police report, but what could I say? No license plate, no confrontation, no crime, technically. Just that feeling, that ice in the spine certainty that someone, somewhere, had picked me out of a crowd. I kept thinking about what might have happened if I'd gone straight home, if they'd followed me into my driveway, if they'd parked and waited. I never saw the truck again, never saw those men. But that didn't matter. Because once you realize how easy it is to become someone's target, how invisible eyes can follow you into the most ordinary places, you don't unlearn it. You just learn how to live with it, and make damn sure you never park far from the entrance again. I had just turned 18 a week earlier and was riding high on the kind of freedom you only feel when you're finally a legal adult, and on the verge of moving states for college. It was mid-August, sticky, late summer heat hanging over everything like a wet towel, and I was trying to cram in as much time with my little sister Lauren and our cousin Brooklyn before my big move. We had a tradition we called Oozy Adventures. No idea how the name came about, probably from some inside joke we forgot the origin of. Basically, we'd pile into my beat-up Corolla with no plan at all and just drive around until something caught our interest. Sometimes it was thrifting, sometimes a Target run, or one time, we just ended up at a gas station eating nachos in the parking lot while raiding every car that passed. This particular day, we decided to go to Costco, not the one closest to us, but the one on the far side of the city. The South Costco, as we always called it. It wasn't in a dangerous area exactly, but it had a reputation. People said it was sketchier, had more thefts, more strange people hanging around. Still, it was hot out, and we figured a massive air-conditioned warehouse and $1.50 hot dogs wouldn't be the worst way to kill time. I remember telling myself we'd just be there for 20 minutes, grab some snacks from my dorm, maybe a throw blanket or two, and head out. We didn't even bring water bottles with us. That decision still haunts me. We arrived at Costco just after 4 p.m. The parking lot was a mess. Half the carts were scattered around like no one even tried returning them. We joked about it, actually. People in this part of town really don't give a damn, I said, pulling into a spot near a cart corral that was overflowing. Lauren, sitting in the passenger seat, laughed. They act like pushing a cart 20 feet is manual labor. Brooklyn behind her chimed in. This place always feels off, like cursed suburban energy. I smiled, but didn't say anything. I felt it too. Not scared exactly, just unsettled. You know that feeling you get when something's about to go wrong, but you can't quite figure out why? We went inside. The second we stepped into that cold blast of warehouse AC, all unease vanished. For a while, we wandered through the store grabbing random things. Lauren found a set of pastel highlighters and a massive case of granola bars. Brooklyn got caught up comparing phone cases and ended up buying one even though it wasn't on sale. I grabbed a fleece throw, a pack of instant mac and cheese, and a box of granola. We joked, we laughed, we argued about whether the sample guy handing out frozen mini tacos was flirting with me. He wasn't. He was like 60. At the checkout, everything still felt normal. We left the store just before 5 p.m. That's when things started to go sideways. My car was now boxed in on both sides. On the driver's side, a dusty gray Chevy Suburban had parked crooked, almost touching my mirror. The windows were tinted dark, darker than legally allowed. I couldn't even see if anyone was inside. On the passenger's side, An older red van with one mismatched door was sitting idling, though no one was in the front seat. "What the hell?" I muttered, narrowing my eyes. There was no one here when we parked. Lauren opened her door slowly, glancing toward the Suburban. I think there's someone in there." I walked around to get into the driver's seat and, as I passed by the Chevy, I caught a glimpse through a tiny sliver in the window where the tint had peeled off near the corner. There was someone in there, and he was lying down, fully reclined, one arm across his chest and the other. I stopped dead. "Get in the car," I said immediately. My voice was calm, but something must have been off in my tone, because both girls froze. Brooklyn asked, "What is it?" "Just get in the car." I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors the second I could, and started the engine. As I reversed, Lauren looked back out her window and gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. He's touching himself. He's looking at kids." He was smiling. I didn't say anything. My hands were shaking, but I kept driving. I didn't want to panic them any more than they already were. Brooklyn looked behind us. "He's still watching. He knows we saw." We pulled into a strip mall across the street and parked behind a Staples. None of us spoke for a few seconds. Lauren suddenly burst out, "We need to tell someone." Brooklyn nodded. "We should call the police." But then Lauren started crying, full-on shaking and sobbing. "What if we get in trouble? What if they tell Mom? I don't want her to be mad at me. She'll lose it." Brooklyn tried to console her, but she wasn't calming down. I wasn't much better. I just sat there, numb, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. I knew we couldn't let this go. That man had been watching kids. He was doing something disgusting, in public, just a few feet away from dozens of families. I hated making phone calls, but I knew one of us had to. Brooklyn volunteered. She was calm somehow, told the dispatcher everything she'd seen, described the car, the location, the man's appearance, what little we could make out. They told us to stay put and said an officer would call us shortly. About 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a female officer. She thanked us for the report and said they had found the Suburban. The man was still inside, pants around his ankles. "Exposing himself" was the phrase she used. Repeated behavior, known offender. She said they'd need us to come down to the station to give a formal statement. I asked if we could do it at the Costco parking lot. She said no. Procedure. I sighed and looked at the girls. "We're gonna have to tell our parents." Lauren immediately broke into another panic. "Number, please, no, don't tell Mom, please, please." But we didn't have a choice. My mom and dad were surprisingly calm when I told them, but my aunt, predictably, she lost it. She wanted to drive straight to Costco herself and drag that pervert out by his throat. My uncle had to talk her down. Eventually, we all met up at the police station. Me, Lauren, Brooklyn, my parents, my aunt and uncle, and my older brother, who insisted on coming just in case things got shady. The police station was quiet, almost eerily so. There were only 2 officers on duty, and we had to wait nearly 2 hours while they called a detective from home. He arrived in pajama pants and a hoodie. I remember thinking how surreal it was to be giving a statement about a child predator to someone who looked like he'd just rolled out of bed and stumbled into the wrong building. Months passed. I moved away to college, hundreds of miles away. Tried to forget about it. Tried to focus on school and meeting new people and not thinking about that man's face or how calm he'd looked while doing something so vile. Then we got subpoenas. He was going to court. Twice, actually. He appealed after the first hearing and we had to testify again. I had to fly home for the second time. Missing class, spending more time and money on something I didn't ask for. He pled guilty the second time. Got almost no jail time. Out on parole, within months. The last time I heard anything was when his parole officer called me, asking if I had experienced trauma or gone to therapy. I told him I had nightmares for months, that I kept checking every parked car I passed, that I could still hear Lauren's voice in my head saying, "He's smiling." I didn't tell him that I had to move dorms because I couldn't sleep on the ground floor anymore. I didn't tell him about the anxiety medication. I didn't want to give that man any more space in my life than he'd already taken. We never went back to that Costco. Not once. Even now, when I come home for holidays, we avoid that entire shopping complex. Lauren refuses to even drive near it. Brooklyn made a joke once, calling it the cart return creep, and we all laughed way too hard, like if we could make fun of it, maybe it would feel less heavy. It didn't. I still don't know why he chose that parking lot, why he thought no one would notice. Or maybe he wanted to be noticed. But I do know this. If we hadn't looked into that car, if we hadn't said anything, how many more kids would have walked by? How many more families would have unknowingly parked beside a predator? And that's what sticks with me the most. Not what happened, but what could have. Let's never meet again. The cart return creep. It was one of those mornings when everything seemed to hit at once. The kind of day where you're already drained and you haven't even stepped out of bed yet. I had worked the graveyard shift at a local warehouse the night before, and my body felt like it had been through a blender. My back was aching in ways I didn't even know possible, and the exhaustion from only getting a few hours of sleep was wearing me down. I knew I needed to do something to get my head together, go out, run a couple of errands, and try to reset. So I threw on a hoodie, dragged myself out of the apartment, and decided to stop by my cousin Jamie's place. She worked at a nearby hair salon, and I figured, why not pop by for a quick trim? She owed me one anyway. It felt good to be in Jamie's chair, even if I wasn't particularly talkative. The hum of the salon was soothing, and I was able to zone out for a bit as she cleaned up my overgrown hair. It didn't hurt that she was giving me a free cut either. When she was done, I felt a little lighter, not just in my hair, but in my mood too. I made a mental note to thank her later for the kindness. With that out of the way, I headed to Costco down the street to grab a few things. I wasn't in the mood to cook, so I figured I'd stock up on frozen meals for the week. The bright fluorescent lights and the endless aisles full of everything from bulk snacks to electronics greeted me as I pushed my cart down the crowded aisles. My mind was occupied with 1,000 thoughts. What to have for dinner tonight, what work tasks I needed to tackle later. As I rounded the corner toward the frozen food section, I nearly collided with a woman coming from the opposite direction. She was in her mid-40s, wearing a simple cardigan and dark sunglasses, even though it was a little chilly inside. At first, I thought it was just one of those awkward near collisions that happen in crowded stores, so I instinctively halted and took a step back. She, however, didn't take the same approach. Instead, she just stared at me, and I caught a glimpse of a nasty scowl creeping across her face. "Excuse me," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the noise of the store. Now, I wasn't exactly in the best mood to begin with. My shoulders were sore, and I hadn't gotten nearly enough sleep. So without thinking much of it, I shot back, "Oh, come on, you're fine." I didn't even mean for it to sound rude, but I suppose the frustration of the day got the better of me, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I probably should have just smiled and moved on, but instead of letting it slide, she stopped, leaving her cart behind, and turned to follow me down the aisle. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get upset, and sometimes they just need to vent. I've been guilty of it before, but when I glanced back a few seconds later, I saw her walking toward me at a quick pace. "Hey, what's your problem?" I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice but not entirely succeeding. "Why are you following me?" She didn't answer right away, but her face twisted into a kind of anger I hadn't expected. Without warning, she rolled her eyes back in her head, and I mean all the way back, like you could only see the whites of her eyes. My heart did a quick flip, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Then, with no regard for anyone around, she opened her mouth wide and let out a scream. It wasn't a normal scream either. It wasn't a shout of frustration or anger. This was a shriek, a banshee-like wail that echoed down the aisles and made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. People around us froze, staring at the woman like she was some kind of circus act. A few even moved closer to see if she was okay. Was she having some kind of mental breakdown? I couldn't process what was happening, but every instinct in me screamed to get the hell out of there. Without thinking twice, I turned and sprinted down the aisle, my heart pounding, desperate to escape the madness behind me. She was still chasing me. "Are you kidding me?" I whispered to myself, looking around at the horrified expressions of bystanders who hadn't yet moved. Some had their phones out, recording the spectacle, while others just stood there, frozen in place. I didn't know what else to do, so I kept running, glancing back to make sure she wasn't right on my heels. But when I reached the entrance of the store, I turned around for just a split second, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There she was, standing just outside the automatic sliding doors, her mouth hanging open in an unnatural way, her eyes still rolled to the back of her head. She was pointing directly at me, her finger extended like she was accusing me of something. I don't know how long we stood there just staring at each other through the glass doors. It felt like a lifetime. She didn't move a muscle, not until she suddenly pivoted and turned back toward the store, walking away with eerie, deliberate steps. I didn't stick around to see where she went after that. I grabbed my car keys from my pocket, my hands shaking slightly, and I bolted out of there. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Had it been real, or was I just overtired from working a 12-hour shift the night before? There were too many questions and not enough answers. I drove over to Walmart, the next closest store, still trying to process what had just gone down. I didn't want to see that woman again, ever. As I walked down the aisles of Walmart, looking for what I needed, all I could think about was her, the way her eyes had looked, the scream, the point. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I couldn't shake it from my mind. The whole time I was in Walmart, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that woman standing in the aisles, or worse, right behind me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I had just seen something weird in the heat of the moment. But the longer I stayed in the store, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I picked up the last few things I needed and made my way to the self-checkout. As I scanned my items, I tried to clear my head, focusing on the beeping of the register, trying to convince myself that I was just overreacting. It was just some bizarre encounter. People lose their temper, they scream sometimes, and sometimes people get a little crazy. But it was still unsettling in a way that didn't quite make sense. Just as I was finishing up and about to grab my bags, the store's lights flickered. My stomach dropped. A chill ran down my spine. It was one of those little glitches. Nothing major. Just a brief flicker. But I couldn't ignore the way the air seemed to change in the store. The light above me buzzed, and for a moment I swore I could hear that same eerie scream echoing in my head. It was nothing, right? Probably just the old lights acting up. But then I noticed something strange in the corner of my eye. In the aisle just to my left, I saw a figure standing there. It was hard to make out, the shadows and dim light making the shape seem almost unreal. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw her, the woman. She was standing still, her body slightly turned toward me, her mouth hanging open in that same unnatural position, her eyes rolled back in her head. She wasn't pointing at me this time, but her gaze seemed to be locked in my direction. The stillness of her form, the eerie quiet around her, it felt wrong. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I had imagined it all earlier. But no, there she was, standing at the end of the aisle, her fingers twitching. It was as if she was waiting for me to notice her, to do something. And it didn't feel like a coincidence. I quickly grabbed my bags and headed for the exit, keeping my eyes on her. I wasn't going to let myself get caught in another insane chase like I did at Costco. But as I moved, I realized she wasn't moving, not an inch. Her stillness was worse than her scream. She didn't need to chase me. All she had to do was exist in the periphery of my mind like a nightmare waiting to unfold. I walked faster, my heart pounding, my hands trembling as I reached for the door. I half expected the lights to flicker again or for her to suddenly appear in front of me. But I made it outside without incident. The cold air hit me as I stepped into the parking lot, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I breathed a sigh of relief. But the sense of unease hadn't left me. I wasn't sure if I was safe or just avoiding the inevitable. The encounter with her earlier had shaken me, but this was different. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or if something truly unnatural had just happened. Either way, I wasn't sticking around to find out. As I reached my car, I turned back one last time to glance at the Walmart entrance. The doors slid open. For a split second, I saw her standing just beyond the threshold. She wasn't facing me now. She was looking down at the ground, muttering something under her breath. Her hands were at her sides, and her head tilted at an odd angle. And then, without warning, she looked directly at me. Her eyes were still rolled back, but now they seemed to pierce through me like she could see straight into my soul. A cold wave of terror swept over me. Without thinking, I jumped into my car, locked the door, and started the engine. As I backed out of my parking spot, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. She was standing at the door, her finger raised and pointing at me once again. But now it felt different. This time, I didn't feel like I was the target. I felt like I was being chosen. I didn't stay to find out what that meant. I sped out of the parking lot, trying to push the fear from my mind. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't shake the image of her twisted eyes, her finger pointing at me. It wasn't just an angry customer. It wasn't just a random encounter. There was something about her, something I couldn't explain, that left me with a feeling I couldn't escape. A feeling that told me this wasn't over, that she was still out there, waiting for me, watching me. And no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun what she had become.